Welcome, everyone, to another exciting edition of the Directors Club podcast, and I am your host, Jim Laskowski. And with me today are two of the smartest people I know. And I'm also really lucky because I get to call them my friends. We have another return appearance from our previous guest everyone knows and loves. Kate Blair, welcome back to the show again.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here for this one.
I know, right? You were. When did we do Celine Sciamma? Like in November, was it?
Something like that. Yeah.
Wow. What is time anyway?
I
I don't.
know, right? And I feel like Chantal Akerman is really interesting to think about right now after quarantine.
Whoa.
So,
Oh yeah, we'll get to that.
yeah.
Undoubtedly. Also joining us for the first time, the founder and creator of the Mental Filmness Film Festival, Sharon Gissy.
Hello. Oh, it's actually Gissy.
Gissy.
Yeah.
Let's try that again.
It's okay. It's a weird name, Gissy. Yeah.
It's cool.
Yeah,
It works.
it's very unique. And yeah, also thank you for having me here. I'm really honored, and what an interesting director and topic. So I'm really glad I got to kind of dig into it a little bit.
It's kind of long overdue
Yeah.
for you to be on, since we've been really good friends for quite a while, a couple years, right?
Yeah.
It's at least been a couple years. And I know you're dedicated and you do your research. You're very thorough. You're a great librarian. You're marching forward. But tell people a little bit about your film festival. When is it, and where can people find out about it and stuff?
Oh, thanks for mentioning that. Yeah, I really appreciate that. It has a website. It's just pretty straightforward. It's mentalfilmness.com. Also has a Facebook page. Neither one of those have been very active as of now because it's in October. So it's I try to plan it around World Mental Health Day, which is always October 10th. But the Film Freeway link should be up on both of those places. So if you want to submit a film, you can there. And I've been going through some of them. I'll do a lot more soon. But we always get a lot of really interesting entries from all over the globe, really.
Oh, for sure. And it was great to help select the first run and watch a lot of these films, including when we weren't in quarantine. You got to host this at an actual venue.
Oh, yeah, I should mention, I feel like that's still kind of uncertain. The first year was at Comfort Station in Logan Square, and then last year I did it through Eventive. So it was like pretty much everything, a virtual streaming festival. So this year, I'm guessing it will still be online, but we'll see whether we're able to maybe have a small gathering in Chicago or not.
Yeah, we'll have to be socially distanced and wearing masks probably, but it's okay. It's worth it. And it's for a good cause, and you bring a lot of attention and awareness to something that a lot of people struggle with, including the director. And I it's pretty remarkable to choose this filmmaker and learn I usually I have some knowledge, or I've seen at least some of the films. This is kind of incredibly fresh for me. I had not seen one of her films, even though I knew one of them in particular was quite renowned, and everybody was like, you have to see it, you have to see it. And like, I see the running time. I'm like, maybe I will see it soon.
Yeah, it's intimidating.
Yeah, it's a little bit like it's the Rivette film that just came out on Criterion. It's one of your favorites, right, Sharon?
Oh yeah, that's about 3.5 hours long, isn't it? Somewhere around there in that neighborhood. Yeah.
I still need to see that.
That's been at the top of my list for a long time, but the running time has put me off of it. But I really do want to see that one.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Chantal Akerman, who is not French, as I originally said on the last episode. I think I just assumed that for some reason, but she's in fact Belgian and most known for a film we will definitely be talking about. And there's going to be a lot of mispronunciation. I'm warning people up front. I sometimes I think that yeah maybe I should actually find somebody who can speak French sometimes just to help me out a little bit, but that's okay. That's okay. People are used to that.
I'm glad I'm not the
And I'm
only one who was worried about that. But I tried to look some up, but yeah, I'm sure I'll get some wrong.
we'll probably just refer to the Jean Dielman without having to say the whole thing every time, I would say.
Yeah, I think that's how most people refer to it in shorthand.
Yes. And I'm also certain she's going to need a sequel episode because there are so many films, especially her documentaries, that I didn't get a chance to dive into extensively the way I wanted to. But one of them worked really beautifully for me. And I will say for a fact that I'm excited to talk about this director, and I'm sure the listeners are going to learn a lot. But for me, like the joy of this show is also um, discovering somebody's work in a way that you never would have expected. Like these are films that, much like the one I want to talk about for the What We Watch segment, you've never seen anything like them before. And you almost have to completely reacclimate how you watch a movie while you're watching them. It's like I really wanted to see John Dielman on the big screen where I have no opportunity to pick up my phone. Like I should have just like locked it away completely, but it's so easy to just be like, oh, I want to tell somebody what I'm watching and tell share my reaction right away. But anyway, this is exciting. It'll be more of a general conversation about the work because more recently I kind of go back to the old format of choosing 2 or 3 films to talk about, but this we've seen a lot, and we've also, oh boy, there's so much to talk about with all the films that we've seen, but it's kind of I'm gonna try my best to keep it at least in chronological order if we can do it that way. Because I think it would be very limiting if we only just talked about 2 or 3 films, and I know we've seen more than that. So that's kind of where we're going, and you know, uh, let's go into the What We Watch segment. You guys ready? Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Early in the morning, I turn on a movie. Watch 200 cigarettes in her shoes and Marnie. Celine and Julie go boating. Annie the good thief. Neighbors good time mother. Dead and buried. 101 Dalmatians. Half-baked and Christine. Now it's time to talk about what we watched recently. What did we just watch? Too many movies, yeah. What did we just watch? Ron Watkins is cute. Okay, cool. So I'm gonna go first this time. Usually I'm like, let's just have the guests go first. But I wanted to mention this particular film because I have not seen anything like it, and it is Last Year at Marienbad.
Oh yeah.
Oh, that's a good one for this episode too.
And it's funny because I had no idea. Like I didn't really do research on it before I started watching it to know that the Delphine Seyrig is the sort of the I was about to say the obscure object of desire in this film. And and she's also in Buñuel's Discreet Charm of the Bourgeoisie, which is now one of my all-time top 20 favorite movies because I watched that for the first time last year and it blew me away. I need to see more Buñuel. But this film is by Alain Renoir. I can't say.
This one I have looked up before. It's Alain Renier, something like
Renier.
that.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Renier. That makes sense. Yeah. This is, again, kind of a challenging film. It's non-narrative, and it's sort of, when I was watching, I was like, this is kind of like a French New Wave Terrence Malick movie because it sort of just cuts randomly to various images. And it's kind of about like dislocation. It intersperses people standing still while other characters are in movement at times, like they're frozen or something. And there's barely a plot in the traditional sense. So it reminded me of the way David Lynch would use dream logic to
Mhm.
convey emotions of the subconscious. It's very difficult to decode. It's something where I'm like, I really enjoyed the experience of watching it, but I'm not exactly sure what it's trying to say for its thesis, and that's fine. Because like scenes sort of float and cut in and out of each other, almost like a time loop fashion. Like sometimes they're walking down a hall, other times they're walking down this like geometric garden or something, and it just like you don't always know where you're at. And I think that's the point because it is about the fragility of fractured memory. And what does this mean when these two people are interacting? And certainly it plays very interestingly in light of watching Chantal Akerman's work, because it is about a man basically like trying to convince this woman, hey, we had this affair last year, and why don't you remember it? Like that's kind of what I'm getting from the movie anyway. I might be projecting a little bit, but that's at least my perception of this male figure trying to like essentially uh control almost her memory, and
Mhm.
yeah, but it also felt like I guess because it was hypnotic, it felt like visiting a hypnotherapist because it has this like soothing voiceover, at times where it's just like, wow, is this ASMR or something? It's like, whoa, this is really soothing too, the way this man is talking. But like I said, he's also trying to convince this woman that they've met before, and there's no certainty whether that's factual or not. So it's like a blurring blend of, all sorts of things that this man is conveying to her, and again it jumps in and out of time, and that's kind of what I like about this director's work that I've seen, which would also include Hiroshima Mon Amour, Je
Mhm.
t'aime, je t'aime, je t'aime, which involves literal time travel.
Mhm.
uh, so this one is confounding, it really is, but it's also mesmerizing because again you're sort of displaced and not sure where you are and whether you believe this man. And I don't know if it was entirely like emotionally satisfying, but I don't know if it's meant to be that either. What do you think, Kate, about this one? Have you seen it?
I have a few times, but it's been a while. I just remember what I remember most about it is like less the people and more like the architecture of the place they're in.
Yeah, for sure.
Especially the just like the topiary and these like really geometric kind of visuals. Um, so yeah, I don't remember a whole lot about the plot, such as it is. But I also have this vague memory, or of like my interpretation of it being that like she maybe does remember, but is kind of pretending she doesn't, or is like lying to herself in a way.
Hmm.
So yeah, it is very confounding and very, very much a puzzle. And I think um, it's one of his earlier movies, right? I think they
Yeah,
get a little bit less sort of puzzling as they go on and kind of have more of an emotional context or content. Um, I know like Hiroshima Mon Amour is one of my favorite movies, and I respond to that one a whole lot more.
me too.
Even though Delphine Seyrig is one of my favorite actresses, I just adore her. But yeah, it's a really, really beautiful movie.
I think at the time it came out, it was a game changer because people weren't used to this style. I mean, there's a little bit of an Hiroshima Mon Amour in terms of jumping around and you know, uh, but there is context to everything that's taking place, and I think it influenced this. Marienbad influenced a lot of filmmakers: Kubrick, Varda, Rivette, Bergman. Just like they all said, "Oh, you can do this. Interesting. Okay."
Yeah,
And
definitely.
definitely David Lynch, like especially for like Inland Empire, I think there's a lot of displacement with Laura Dern's character in that I think is really powerful at times. And yet, like I said, I think I feel more strongly about the other two films of his that I've seen, and I want to see more for sure. And the other one, really quickly, is Barbara Loden's only film,
Mm.
Wanda. And I just caught up with it last night and was pretty floored by it. I had a hard time sort of comprehending her decision to be with this bank robbing asshole because he was such a dick. I'm just like, why do you want to? I don't know. Why do you want to be with this guy? That's the thing that kind of it took. I mean, obviously, I sort of went with it and just sort of submitted almost in the way that she does, just like gave in to like, okay, this is the logic of just I'm gonna be with this asshole and just go wherever. Like she's like almost surrendering
Yeah,
to
that's really true.
just whatever comes her way, and it's a little sad to watch. I mean, just like, oh man, you can do better. That's there's so much you could do, and but it ends in this really sad note of her being in a like feeling alone in a crowded bar, and I think that ending on that image is really strong for sure. Um, Sharon, what do you think of Wanda?
And I
Have you
actually
seen it?
haven't seen Wanda. I've seen last year Marienbad, but I
Oh,
haven't
that's right.
seen
I'm
Wanda.
sorry. I forgot to ask what
No,
you
that's
thought of
okay.
that.
I was just laughing. No, it's fine. I was going to say something similar to what Kate said. Is I haven't seen it in quite a while, but my memory of it was different. I didn't feel like the man was coercing her in any way. I felt it was more about time and memory, and something that may or may not have happened. But yeah, it's just
Mm,
I don't know. I just didn't get that same perspective. But I haven't seen in quite a while, and I could see like watching it in the light of the Chantal Akerman, how you might not necessarily trust the male narrator, but yeah. But actually, I have been wanting to see Wanda for a very long time, but I was kind of surprised. I thought it wasn't it about kind of like women's labor or something like that, or
it starts out that way.
okay.
It definitely starts that way. But then she kind of goes on this detour, maybe 20, 30 minutes in,
Hmm.
and it really just becomes about almost like a not like Bonnie and Clyde, but she just hooks up with this, you know, guy that she sort of stumbles upon haphazardly because she needs to use the restroom at a bar. And this guy just happens to be there robbing the place and trying to cover it up. And so he just sort of like takes her along and
Hmm.
but he treats her so terribly. I'm just like, it
When I
was
s- when
really
I
hard to
saw
watch.
it, it reminded me a lot of Kelly Reichardt's River of Grass. Almost
Ooh,
like
yeah,
River of
good
Grass
call.
was like a remake of it, and I wasn't aware. They were like very similar to me in a lot of ways.
Definitely, yeah. Yeah, good call. I think Kelly Reichardt's definitely influenced by that film and
Yeah,
Ackerman's work as well, for sure.
yeah, that's a good point.
Kate, what have you seen recently besides Ackerman films?
Oh, yours are really good. I think the one I decided to talk about, I think the one I've seen most recently that really stuck with me was Rachel Getting Married. Have you all seen that
I
one?
have,
Oh
yeah.
wow, not
Yeah,
in a long time. I gotta rewatch that for sure because I love Demi. So
yeah, me too. And there was just like so much that I loved about that movie. I think I avoided it for a long time because I knew that um, that Anne Hathaway's character would be difficult to watch, and she is. She like nails that cringe kind of um, like persona very well. The just out of rehab and very sort of accidentally uh, centering herself a little bit too much, maybe at her sister's wedding. But
yeah,
there's also a lot of it. Just struck me as very realistic the way weddings can bring out all of these really intense emotions in families. And then I loved how, being a Jonathan Demme movie, it was punctuated with performance. So whenever things get really intense, there'll just be like a soul band or like like jazz music, and it just felt very real. Um, yeah, I loved it a lot.
yeah, and Deborah Winger's in it, and I think that was at
Yeah.
a time when, yeah, it had been a while since we'd seen her.
Yeah, I'm not really familiar with that actress. I knew her name, and I thought she did great, but I don't really know her that well.
Yeah, she's most known for Terms of Endearment, which ooh, that's a tearjerker if there ever was one. But it's one of those that, like, oh, you think you're gonna lump it in with Fried Green Tomatoes and Steel Magnolias or something, but it's, and not to say that like I don't appreciate those movies, especially for their portrayals of female friendships. But the Terms of Endearment just like kind of blew my mind when I saw it, and similar to James L. Brooks's work with broadcast news. I just think that he's
Mhm.
a phenomenal screenwriter, and yeah, no, I mean, I can see even a little bit of James L. Brooks' influence for Demi's film here, and just how real things get. And sometimes you're laughing and cringing at some of the behavior taking
Yeah,
place throughout. I want to
just
say,
very
was it
real.
written by Sidney Lumet's daughter? I want to say, like, I feel like that. Let me see if I'll look it up to see if I'm right.
I know it is written by a woman, and I thought,
Yes, I was right. Oh my,
oh,
sorry, I
nice.
got too excited. Sorry.
Yeah, the writing is great, um, and it grounds
Yeah,
the whole thing very well.
no, but I definitely need to revisit that because I remember loving it when it came out,
Yeah, I
and
probably will too, because yeah, there's a lot a lot of depth to it.
it's probably still my favorite Anne Hathaway performance. I
Yeah,
think.
she's excellent.
Yeah, for sure. Sharon, were you a fan of this one?
Yeah, I actually I was just thinking about I actually saw that at Ebert Fest a few years ago, and I do it has kind of like a Cassavetes like to me, like
Mm.
realism and character study of this, addicted or former addict, and it has a lot of moments. It was balanced really well with how kind of close she is to her family, where there's also still that tension there, because I don't know, I don't want to give away any spoilers, but she had like a family
Right,
accident a while
Mm.
back that due to her addiction, and that's kind of strained things a little bit. And but yeah, no, I feel like it would really got those things very accurately portrayed, the addiction and the family, how that kind of changed the family dynamics a little bit.
yeah, absolutely. And yeah, the spoiler that I won't talk about it either, but I feel like it was dealt with very well in a way that, it might have been sort of too much, but it actually added a lot of depth to this movie, I think, and I was kinda surprised by that. It wasn't, I don't know, like a trauma porn kinda thing where it really could have gone that way, I think.
Yeah, no, it was mostly kind of in the background. It was kind of like really tastefully done. It only came up like a couple. Well, you get the feeling some time has passed, but yeah, it's it definitely wasn't. That's a good way to say it. It wasn't trauma porn. It wasn't like in your face or too melodramatic or anything like that. Yeah.
And the way the family, their different reactions to it, it all felt very real.
Yeah.
So I appreciated it a lot.
Yeah. Well, it's on HBO Max, and
That was
geez,
where I watched it. Yep.
this I might just watch this tonight. It's been so long, so yeah, it's, gosh, it's a special film. I wasn't on for the Jonathan Demme episode. That was back when I had two other hosts, Brad and Al, take over the show, and that was one episode I was like, yeah, I should have been on.
Yeah.
I love everything uh, about that director, for sure. Sharon, your turn. What did you see recently?
I was trying to think of something highbrow and impressive, but it's mostly been these movies I've been watching. Yeah, I did watch the HBO QAnon documentary.
Yes, I've been watching
I
that
got
too.
kind of addicted to that.
Oh
So
man.
that was really interesting, because it wasn't really what I thought it would be. Instead of kind of focusing on the followers, it was more about the kind of internet culture that helped create this phenomenon. And how people are so just don't trust the media, and so it's very easy for them to kind of latch onto something that goes viral and seems to kind of explain things in a weird way. And then also, to me, another really interesting aspect of it was the whole 8chan kind of standing for this idea of freedom of speech on the internet, but where is the level where the freedom of speech kind of tips over into hate speech or being dangerous, and they talked about that law, I think it's section 230, where a website cannot be held liable for anything that's published on the website. So that leads to all these things, algorithms, looking for, certain groupings of words, and so, because they're too big to monitor everything. So, I mean, that actually kind of, I felt like it raised some interesting ideas, even though, it's a little bit of sensationalism to it, I guess. Other than that, yeah, other than these, like, I guess I've been kind of like, watching a lot of escapism, one thing. And I know Jim and I disagree about this movie, but I've watched,
Oh, no, 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 don't do it. Don't do it.
I've watched this. I have to give it a flag. Psycho Goreman a couple times, which is just a really fun kind of parody of an 80s, kind of like kids finding weird stuff, but they actually happen upon this kind of like monster. It's really like
Oh, I
um,
know this.
who's a really vicious monster. And that's kind of like the joke, the main joke. But it was done by Stephen Kostansky, who is like one of the big guys in the Astron 6 collective, who I'm a big fan of, this kind of Canadian, troupe that does these really, really fun, funny parody movies, and they replicate the style really well, I feel like. So, I mean, I've just.
This
These
is
are
more
my
recent.
art movies I've been watching, and then I guess the other stuff has been kind of more kind of lowbrow and fun. But yeah, those are, to be perfectly honest, those are two things I've watched recently that I've enjoyed. Yeah.
Oh boy.
I just had to mention. We don't have to debate it, but I do. I really enjoy that movie, and I'm not the only one.
Lots of people love
Yeah.
it. I don't.
Is that a recent movie or?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think
Okay,
it's been
I feel
out
like
in the
I saw
past year.
it on like one of those horror blogs. I might have read a review.
That's very likely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, like a positive review.
See?
Yeah, I haven't seen it though.
That's fun.
Where would I watch it if I wanted to watch it? Is it streaming somewhere?
I think I saw it on Amazon. Yeah. The almighty
Okay.
Amazon.
Yeah, it was interesting. I think I have to watch it stoned, because like the humor just. Mm, I don't know why I didn't find it that funny. Like, I guess it's an acquired taste, and obviously it's subjective. But it was kind of like, what if Trauma made the Gate in the Monster Squad? That's kind of what I like.
You're kind of selling me on it, Jim. This sounds good to me.
No, most people love it, and I don't know. Maybe I was in a bad mood or something. I can't explain. It's one of those things. Like, every once in a while, there'll be this big pop cultural like touchstone that everybody's kind of going, "Oh, this is awesome! I loved it, and it's great." And I'm kind of like, "Huh? What? I don't get it. What's wrong?" It happens, and I'm not like poo-pooing on people who do like it. I just kind of went, I like the idea, and it's similar to how I felt about Turbo Kid, where it was just kind of like, I don't know, kind of gimmicky. you know
That, yeah. I could see that. I think it does. A lot of it boils down to whether you respond to the humor. Well, most of it, I would say, and I feel like they have a good like an absurdist humor. Actually, I don't think your description was too far off, but I feel like their sense of humor is a little more subtle and absurdist than Trauma. Trauma just seems more
Sure, sure, sure.
in your face. I don't know, but yeah.
Yeah, more gross, more
Funny.
outlandish.
Yeah, more gross. I didn't think it was all that gross or gory, or a little bit here and there, but yeah.
Yeah, it's all right. I mean,
We
I'll
can
watch
move
it
on.
again sometime. But I know, I mean, like the QAnon thing is fascinating, and you mentioned more of the macro level machinations of everything that surrounds it. To me, it's a fascinating character study too. On top of it, like Jim Watkins, Ron Watkins, and Frederick Brennan are just like insane characters to watch and it's like I couldn't I some of the things they were doing obviously I don't abide by and I think are kind of reprehensible, particularly Ron and Jim. I don't like those people.
They're interesting
i
though,
think
yeah.
I think Puppy agrees with me on that.
Oops, yeah.
It's fine, but I mean, like, I don't know, I understand why people get caught up in message boards, and certainly during the Trump administration, why people sort of created this community to express their political ideology and the beliefs that they have. But at the same time, like, it made me angry, but I couldn't stop watching.
Yeah, yeah.
And but it really gets, I don't know, like the last two episodes was like, I don't know, I felt really involved in a way that I hadn't planned on. Like, for the most part, like especially the first couple episodes, I'm mostly like rolling my eyes or kind of laughing or going, "Oh, that's a good point. That's interesting." And the conspiracy theory stuff, I'm like, "Oh my god, people!"
Yeah.
but but then by the last two episodes, I'm kind of like, I was a little invested in in Frederick, being able to escape his lawsuit
Oh,
because
Right.
right,
that's
yeah.
actually really heavy. you know like I was like, oh my gosh, is he gonna make it on time? And like there's all these factors of him being able to get to LA and all that stuff. It was interesting for the director to sort of insert himself into that. I mean, he does throughout the entire
Yeah.
documentary series, but at that point he got really personally involved. Like he really like sacrificed himself to help out Frederick. you know I found that really interesting, and certainly, I mean, I don't know if it's like spoiler territory, but because
It
there's
really
like
happened.
articles written about it already. Yeah, it happened in real life. But I don't know. I personally believe it's that Ron took over and stole Q's identity at one point. So
Yeah.
I think he is Q.
Yeah, it becomes a
I
really compelling
certainly,
story, yeah. Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
oh no, just I think the director, the way he'll just like linger on these people's faces and they'll like just kind of blink very nefariously, like you can tell they're lying,
Yeah.
or just very much seems like they're lying. Uh,
Yeah,
yeah, especially what is his name? You just said it, but I can't remember. This
Ron,
Ron,
or
yeah,
yeah.
he just seems very squirrely, especially
Mhm.
when he's like, "No, I don't know who it is," and then
Yeah.
he'll just blink a lot.
Or do a little
Yeah,
laugh. "You think it's me?"
yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah, that that guy drove me bonkers. But in a good way. That's the thing. It's like it's compelling throughout. I mean, I don't know. Maybe it didn't need to be 6 episodes long, but I think that's the case with for like a lot of these documentary series in general. It's like, I don't know. Are they too long? I didn't
yeah.
feel long, but
It felt a little long to me, but I also really, really like the intro song. I don't know what
mm,
it is about that song. It has like this crazy circus music feel that really like puts your mind in the conspiracy zone. I enjoy it a lot.
yeah, for sure. No, I'm kind of a sucker now for a lot of these documentary series that comes out. I mean, sometimes it's true crime stuff, and that's really easy to get sucked into. But this one was really interesting, and that it explored something I knew very little about, but I kind of knew it was out there anyway. Like obviously, I'd heard of 4chan and 8chan and all that stuff, but I'm glad it's out there.
Yeah.
I think it's really interesting
Yeah.
to talk about and watch, and certainly hear different reactions from people. And well, things certainly didn't turn out in these believers' favor in the end. So I'm like, well, maybe they're all lost souls now. Who knows? I don't know. But that was cool. All right. we can take a break if you want, because we're going to talk about Chantal Akerman. Chantal Akerman. Such a special woman with film so controlled. Yeah. Groundbreaking cinema you'll never forget. Her name is Chantal Akerman. Jean Gillman is so perfect, yeah. Her name is Chantal Akerman. Go to the Criterion Channel as fast as you can. Yeah. So, Chantal Akerman. Wow. What a director. Throughout most of the viewings I had, I was kind of rendered speechless at the end. And, there were a couple I didn't, respond to as strongly as some. And I think that's inevitable when you're binging on a lot of work. And she made a lot of work for sure. A lot of it, for people who aren't familiar, is on the Criterion Channel, thankfully. Thank God for that service.
That was really helpful.
Oh, for sure. But in the words of the director herself, she once said, "If I have a reputation for being difficult, it's because I love the everyday and I want to present it. In general, people go to the movies precisely to escape the everyday." And that, like, especially John Dielman, I was watching him like, oh my God, my mom would absolutely hate watching this. Because, that's primarily why she wants to watch movies, is to escape life in general. And I think that would drive her, because I've seen her peel potatoes, and it's like, she would hate that moment to watch that in a movie.
Right.
I do that every day. I don't need to see it. But no, I like Chantal Akerman saw Jean-Luc Godard's Pierre Le Fou and wanted to become a filmmaker. She emerged at a time when there were very few women making experimental films, or any films for that matter, and she sort of employs this like formal minimalism at times with this sort of documentary approach to represent just this sort of straightforward or banal existence. It's clear she struggled at times with mental health and depression. She left us too young at the age of 65, but there are lots of work that you can certainly go through, and we're going to go through some of it here. First up, I really wanted to talk about this short film she made when I believe she was 18, in like this confined space of her own apartment, showcasing like this nervous breakdown, but kind of in this, she described it as wanting to do something Chaplin-esque at the time.
That's funny.
Yeah, but it's like, she's externalizing the internal in this really intense manner, but it's also got this really sort of dark humor going on as she's stumbling around in her kitchen and being drunk. And, like, to me, a lot of her work is kind of like this rejection of domesticity, and certainly not falling into routines and patterns, but inevitably we all do. But I think this first like short film, when I watched it, is kind of like, this kind of says a lot about her, I'm sure. Like, she's being really honest and really personal about what might go on inside of her. So I think it's interesting just to start there, because it really indicates where she goes eventually with her work. What do you guys think? Sharon, let's start with you this time.
Okay. I'm new to this whole, I'm not sure when I should be butting in, but yeah, I think I think you said it really well, that it really, to me, like, encapsulates a lot of her themes, like, right off the bat.
Yeah.
This almost there's this kind of like compulsive behavior, and the suicidal instinct, and yeah, a big part of that revolves around her kitchen and then domestic chores, which it feels like something that's kind of taken, and you see this in Jean Dielman too, where it's kind of like domestic chores taken to their extreme, to the point where they become compulsive. Like she starts doing the, and I can almost see it like Chaplin, as she starts shining or blacking her boots, and then she gets all over her leg, like she's got to work so hard. And then the other really unnerving thing about it is that there's this kind of like, that loud, like manic humming that's coming, like
Yeah.
she's not doing it. It's like a voiceover kind of thing, and it gets louder, and this la 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 kind of, it's very unnerving. And but at the same time, there is kind of like a dark humor to it's almost like this, I don't know, her kind of doing her idea of what she should be doing. I almost see like, this is me being a responsible adult. I'm making spaghetti. But it's like breaking down or something. But yeah, I mean, what and the fact that you can say so much like that about a short film that someone made when they were 18 years old is pretty
I know.
astounding.
It really is. I yeah, I kind of marveled at it. It's like, yeah, obviously it's a debut work, but it's still saying so much. And I know she spoke about like the important influence on her work was her maternal grandmother painted these large canvases which showed women who appeared to be looking out at the viewer. And I think that also speaks volumes about her tendency to use the female gaze in really interesting ways. And sometimes one thing I noticed too is watching these movies is that anytime there's intimacy of any kind, I don't feel like it's voyeuristic in the way that a man would shoot it.
Hmm.
And that kind of struck me as being really refreshing to experience. But I also really thought, and we're talking about this in regards to another film coming up. Sort of captures the madness you have when you're in quarantine of some kind. Whether if it's what we've been through personally in the past year, but if you're just like, I don't know, maybe you've lost your job recently and you're not doing a whole lot and you're just sitting in your apartment, you kind of go mad. You kind of go mad without any sort of structure or reason to get out of the house. You kind of lose your shit, and it shows in this film while also being really funny too. Kate, what did you think?
Um, yeah, I agree with what Sharon said, or especially I hadn't read that she thought this was Chaplin-esque, but that makes so much sense watching it. Um, because it was a lot funnier than I thought it would be. I kind of put off watching it just because I know that Chantal Akerman died by suicide, and the character in this film, who's played by her, also dies by suicide. If that's, I guess that's what happens. It's kind of,
Yeah, it kind of she blows up her apartment, I think.
yeah. So, but the whole thing does have this comedic um, energy to it that surprised me. It wasn't hard to watch like I thought it would be, even though it is pretty unnerving, especially with that voiceover, which yeah, come isn't like it isn't Chantal Akerman on screen doing that. I don't know where it comes from, but it is pretty upsetting. And like the idea of sort of the domestic breaking down, or like this girl sort of playing at adulthood, is very interesting. I think for some reason what stuck out to me was when she's making spaghetti, that she does it like all wrong. She like puts the spaghetti in the cold water, turns on the pot afterward, doesn't stir the noodles in. And then but then there's like a jump cut and she's eating noodles Like, it's very interesting, and it's very well done, I think, for an 18-year-old who, like, did she have any training? I don't really think so, right? Or I
No,
don't
I don't
know.
think she did.
Yeah, it just I don't know. She's very brilliant, and she had things to say right away
Yeah.
that are really cohesive with the rest of her output. So it's a really fascinating film to watch.
Yeah, I don't know if I saw that said the title because I was afraid, but Saute Saute May Ville from 1968. Um, obviously, I'm going to put some links in the show notes to the filmography and everything, so people can definitely seek these out. And I encourage you to do so, of course. But I think the next one that came up and really responded to me. I mean, there's some work in between for sure, and if you've seen them, go ahead and we can talk about those as well. But the IU he she
Mhm.
J to il L,
I think that's about right, yeah.
Mhm.
Je tu il elle.
yeah, came out I believe a year before Jean Dielman, and oh boy, what a film this was again. It makes sense to kind of go from the last film we talked about to this because there's a solid half hour of Ackerman herself in this unwavering isolation in another tiny apartment, trying to figure out the best place to put her mattress. And it's like, oh my god, I think I've done that. It's like you're trying to figure out where things should go in a smaller space. Ooh, that resonated with me, but also staring out the glass door and feeling this kind of longing. And then she starts eating a lot of sugar.
Yeah.
Uh, and yeah, it's really it's sad. It's startled. It's kind of just I wasn't prepared for. I mean, I knew about her work and certainly what we'll talk about soon enough, but I think this really took me by surprise in that once we do get out of this apartment, she has some incredibly interesting encounters, particularly with this truck driver.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, and like I said, but it's almost similar to Jean Dielman. Like the sex performed in this film is wouldn't say it's like an afterthought, but it's almost like mechanical or like not even there's no emotion going on. It's almost like there's a dissociation in a way.
You
Uh,
mean art in the final?
well, yeah, for sure, definitely that. Um, but even just the I don't know the hand job in the truck,
Oh,
to,
yeah.
as he's like giving this monologue about his life and stuff. It was I was like, this is a really interesting choice. I'm not always sure what she's saying, but I appreciate the audacity and certainly just the go for broke nature that she has when making a film like this. I mean, these static shots feel very dignified and observational without, like I said, feeling voyeuristic. It's just like we're watching the world as it is, as it unfolds. And she really has this in this film in particular has this really incredible relationship with silence.
Mhm.
Like she will just sit in it for a long
Yeah.
time, even in diners. It's just like and you expect, okay, this truck driver and her are going to have some conversations, but it's like the restaurants that they're in, there isn't any of that really. So that was a really bold choice. It sort of made me think of what Sofia Coppola did with Somewhere, where it was just like there's just a lot of silence and what some people might consider boring moments. But to me, like I find a lot of beauty in the boring, especially the way she films it and frames it. But then, like I said, the sort of wrestling match, uh, the intimate wrestling match at the end, I was kind of floored by because you just never seen anything like that, and yet it also ends on a note of like dissociation.
Yeah.
So, Kate, what did you think of this one?
Oh, man. I, like, really liked it. I think it's divided into, like, 3 parts, and that's what the title is too.
Mm-hmm.
what is it, a girl, a boy, and or I don't exactly know, but
Well,
or
it's
maybe,
I, you, he, she. So it's
uh,
almost like we
yeah.
look at her, then we look at the audience, I guess, to some degree, but then the he and the she too.
So I think I especially respond to the first part of it, which is the one where the girl played by Chantal Akerman herself is just like sitting in her room, like you said, in various positions, moving things around. And like I said, I watched all of these in quarantine. So I think they all kind of hit me in this different way than I think they might have in a different time in my life, where I'm very accustomed to spending a lot of time in one room often and just kind of like looking around it and sometimes moving the furniture around and like, um, just like really getting to know the relationship between my body and this space, which is, I think, like all I was thinking about in this first sequence was just like, and this is a thing that I feel like comes up a lot in her other movies too. It's just like this idea of human spaces, and
Hmm.
like the way we exist in them, and like whether they're actually designed well for a human body or like for human thriving. I just is something I thought about a lot. In this particular thing, it's just kind of like obviously it's a very tiny space and she's all alone in it. And she's really just got a bed and paper and writing. She spends a lot of time writing something that you never
Yeah.
see. I think it's a letter maybe. Or yeah, she reads it. I think it's a letter. And eating sugar. Um and you just have these long takes of her eating sugar, and I think she must actually be eating it like real time on the screen. So it's very difficult to watch. It's just like, oh, okay. um, but yeah, I don't know what to make of it necessarily either. I just kind of felt like I was hanging out with her, and that's a thing that I feel a lot when I'm watching these movies. Like you said, it's not necessarily a voyeuristic gaze. It's just, and because it's all in real time or like feels like real time, it really has this feeling of real life. That, like I said, feels different in quarantine because I actually, in a different time in my life, I felt like maybe it would have been difficult to watch some of these things. But because I have so many stretches of time, it felt like just a good way to fill that time. And I think that felt very interesting to me as well.
Yeah, it's interesting how now I think we're sort of controlling our anxiety by controlling these little increments of time through
Mhm.
routine. And I think that, I mean, I think that's, it's kind of been that way all along in our lives, because we went to school, and then we went to college, and then we went to a job, and now it's like there's always that sense of familiarity with how things are and how things are supposed to be, and then if something is off, that can really set you off. And I think we're going to get to that more so in the next film for sure. uh Sharon, what was your response to this Marvel? I was, as I'm watching it, it's like, yeah, I do feel like I'm hanging out with her as well, in a good way.
Well, yeah, no, I mean, you guys hit upon a couple of the things I thought while watching it, which I feel like you can't help but watch the first part without thinking of quarantine. Like I'm trapped in this room. What do I do now? Oh, I'm gonna paint my furniture blue. I thought it was funny too that it's black and white, and she talks about the colors that she's painting her
Oh,
furniture.
true. Yeah.
Yeah, good
I
point.
wonder if that was like another example of dark humor. But yeah, and then she's, I'll rearrange, I'll do this. Writing the letter, and look at, just observing, looking out the window, seeing the snow fall or hearing the kids play outside, shows a slightly different time. But I mean, like how you said, it's just, she is just so unafraid to just let time unfold, like we're just going to let time unfold. And you're gonna be watching this, you're gonna be living with this, and feeling the same thing that the character is feeling, that I'm just getting through this time right now. And I mean, for me, I couldn't help, I mean, two of the things that probably, and I don't know if this is a spoiler, trailer that are probably going to stand out to people are the sex scenes in this movie. And I think especially in contrast, the one with the man and the one with the woman, which are very different. And I feel like it's the way that the man, I just feel like in general, a lot of times men don't really present well in her movies. And this particular man, I mean, I could be, I'm probably, generalizing, or I'm being too broad here, but this man is, I think you had mentioned he has a monologue that is very, incredibly depressing about his married life, and
And a little creepy.
Well,
very
yeah, and
creepy as well.
he says something really creepy about his daughter, doesn't he? Am I remembering that right?
Yeah, no, you're right. You're remembering.
I had to rewind that to make sure I understood and got that. I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah, no, and Sharon, I think you're right. I had the same thought watching her movies that like they're I feel like I mean this is true of a lot of her characters, but the men in particular I think have this tendency to monologue in a way that not the women don't necessarily, although like they do to a certain extent. But in this one it seems especially egregious. He has like the most speaking time, even though he has probably the least screen time. But he just kind of monologues at her whenever they're interacting.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, but I mean,
Or
Yeah.
yeah.
silent.
And I feel like it's a very, yeah, I'm trying to think how I don't know if I've really processed how all the parts of this movie link together. But I do feel like with the man, she feels more like she's an accessory, maybe. With the woman, there's definitely a lot of passion there, but then there's not a commitment, or, she's still kind of like disassociates or ends up alone, so um it's interesting. Yeah, I'm not really sure what to make of that, other than maybe it's kind of like trying on different roles, and this one feels more natural, but this, in the end she's kind of still the eye. She's just herself. She doesn't, you know pigeonhole into one identity or another.
Yeah, there is definitely like a fluidity of identity going on that's really compelling, but it also does feel like three short films
Hmm.
sort of strung together, which I don't think it's a bad thing. I kind of went, again, sometimes when you're not used to a certain type of film and you do respond to it, but even when it's over, you're kind of like, I'm not sure what that movie was trying to say, but I don't mind that I didn't get it.
Yeah.
It's like maybe my brain isn't wired a certain way to get it, and that's okay because I enjoyed the experience of it. And certainly, yeah, I mean there are times with that truck driver where I'm like, ugh, I don't think you should be spending time with him. But yeah, I think she's just trying to have these connections. I mean, I don't know of her personal life too extensively if she was bisexual or not. But
She was, I'm pretty sure.
okay, yeah,
Yeah.
that makes sense, given the films that we've seen. But yeah, it does kind of end on this sad, disconnected note that also, yeah, it's like, okay, well that was something that happened, and who knows where she's going to go from there. And I think that is a nice transition into what I think is what everybody probably considers this to be her masterpiece. There's one film we'll be talking about that I actually responded to even more, but that's more of a personal thing for me. Because although I definitely, ugh, it's this is a hard movie to talk about because it so much has been written about it and so much has been said. Jean Dielman is a true work of art that is this sustained experiment in duration through these time images that really considers this oppressive weight of, like Kate said, these domestic spaces and how it can affect your psyche. And I got so involved and unnerved with the littlest things. Sharon, I messaged you at one point, and I like, no, don't go have sex with that guy. You just left a pot. You left the stove on. Don't do that. You're gonna ruin your potatoes. Like I could not. It was like watching a thriller.
Oh, yeah.
It's so crazy how this affects your perception of not just the reality within the film is affected my own reality, which is kind of funny because now it's like, oh, when I do these routines, I start thinking of this movie a little bit, and that's a good thing. It really, because Chantal Akerman did not want to be labeled as this feminist filmmaker, but at the same time, it's hard not to look at this movie as making some sort of, I wouldn't say necessarily like statement about women and certainly what they go through on, just through just, being domesticated and all that stuff. And but it's almost like she's in a prison, and she's trying to find her way out. Like she's become the slave to routine. And once things start going awry, I was feeling what she was feeling, or when she's just sitting there, sort of processing all of her feelings and the fact that things aren't going the way that they normally do. I sort of felt what she felt. So it's like the ultimate experience in empathy for one. But I am dying to hear what both of you think of Jean Dielman. Kate, let's start with you.
Yeah, it is so hard to know where to start. And I feel like I think the things that strike me about her films are things that all of them have. So once again, yeah, it's kind of like this movie that's just about like the relationship between a woman and her space.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and you just get to know that space so well. Like you really get to see like I can picture the tiles in her kitchen very vividly, and like just the way she fits in her kitchen. Um, and I think that's very interesting. And just like all of her films, and especially this one, it's about duration. Which reminds me of a thing that I read an interview with Chantal Akerman, and I don't think I'll be able to quote her directly, and it was translated anyway, so I probably wouldn't be. But she said something about um, how whenever you watch one of her movies, she's like taken time away from you that you like won't get back, which I think is fascinating. So it's a thing she's aware
Hmm.
of. She's like, you're going to be very aware of the time passing, and at the end of it, you will like spend 3.5 hours with this movie that you will never get back. Um, which is just like it's interesting to think about with any of her films, but especially this one being 3.5 hours long, and it's supposed to take place over 3 days, and it really does feel long. And it's like you really feel like you know Jean Dielman as a person after it, even though she really doesn't talk. It's just kind of like with the previous movie, kind of like you're hanging out in a room with her and just getting to know her by way of watching her routine. Um, and it is very interesting. And I also read that a lot of Jean Dielman's routine is sort of inspired by Chantal Akerman's mother, who she had a very close relationship with.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So these are a lot of things that she watched her own mother doing, just like lovingly preparing a meal, even though there is like a sort of coldness about it. It's also it's this weird tension, I think. Like I don't always feel like it's a prison. I feel like sometimes there's a sort of celebration going on of what she's doing, or just like an elevation of like this is women's labor. This is how much time it takes, and just sort of like an awareness of how women spend their time, or at least women in this socio-political climate, I guess.
But
I
I
mean,
also I also felt a little sad because it's mainly in service of men, including her
her
son.
son, yeah. And then the other thing about it is the sex work that's just kind of exists alongside this other labor she does. And I think for its time, it's a really like good depiction of sex work. Like it doesn't seem like Chantal Akerman is looking down on it in any way to me. She's just kind of like, well, yeah, this is how this woman makes ends meet. Like she needs to do all this labor to keep her house, but where does she get money from now that her husband is gone? Um, so yeah, it's such a rich film, and I feel like you could talk about it for 3.5 hours. Like
Oh,
as long,
I totally
yeah,
want to, but we don't have
yeah,
that all the time in the world, unfortunately. But I think yeah, the way she's framed too, when the men come to visit, I found really interesting
Mhm.
because we don't see her face. It's most mainly about taking the coat and the hat and treating it like a transaction,
hmm,
which was really interesting to me. Um, Sharon, how do you feel about this work of art?
Yeah, I mean, this is actually the only movie of hers I had heard of, and I hadn't even seen it. And I purposefully tried not to learn anything about it before I watched it, so I didn't know about the big climax, which I don't know if I should or should not mention what it is, but I won't.
No pun
But
intended with that.
yeah,
right, there you go. But I actually, even had I not known, actually I didn't know what was coming, but I felt uneasy the whole movie. And I don't know if you guys felt this way, but I definitely felt like it was this whole kind of I'm doing this to keep from breaking down. Like I have to keep my routine going. I have to scrub the tub at this time. I have to, make the meat at this time. And it was very, to me, it felt like this whole, like, it was almost like a horror movie. Where she had this routine
yeah,
Some people have described it that way. Yeah, like a
ward
you're
horror
totally
movie of
right.
yeah.
OCD.
So it's
Yeah.
like she's trying to ward something off, right? And there's these few moments where where a little bit of, humanity or something comes in, like she reads that letter to her son, but it's just like completely in a monotone, even though it's like, an emotional letter, and you learn about that her husband died and are you going to marry again? It's this complete monotone, complete absence of emotion. And it just made me feel like she's just repressing and repressing. So yeah, I guess I had a little bit of a different feel. I felt like it was just this whole, yeah, like this portrait of repression, and almost this kind of like, and it's funny because you can see that in her earlier short film too, this the Soup Maville, is this whole, I'm going to do this chore so I don't have to think about at least that's the way it felt to me. I don't have to think all my dark thoughts. I don't have to dwell on, the melancholy of, my dead husband or whatever else I would be thinking about. And to me, it felt like so. And I read a little bit about this movie after I watched it. And you can see around, like, at the time after she meets with the second client, things are kind of like unwinding a little bit. And there's this, like,
Yeah, her hair is all a
falls
mess at
off,
one point.
Mhm.
Yeah.
right? And it starts, to me, it feels like a horror movie. Like things are, she's not able to keep it up anymore. And there's that one scene in particular where she's peeling the potatoes, and it's so aggressive, like that really, like I actually kept flinching because I thought something was going to happen. I actually thought she was gonna like peel the skin on her hand a little bit or something. It just felt, I felt so much tension during that peeling potatoes scene when, she like overboiled them or something and she sat down to peel them. So to me, it's, yeah, that was kind of the take. I felt very uneasy watching it, and I knew, I figured, I didn't even know this, but I figured it was heading for some kind of dark, you know, ending or territory or something. So yeah, it's, I don't know, maybe I just fear domestic chores, but I did something with
Yeah, I
it.
mean,
It's like a
definitely.
compulsive routine. That's how I saw it, a compulsive
Hmm.
routine that almost seemed like a barrier or protection. Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely think it does have that, like a lot of it. And you're right about like the food preparation. I was thinking about the meatloaf making.
Oh yeah.
That's the part that makes me really
Wow.
Spanish. Because she really like you watch in real time as she like transforms the texture of it, and it's just like very like ugh, very gross.
Yeah, I didn't have a taste for meatloaf after watching that.
Yeah.
I was just like, wow, yeah, that doesn't look so good. Maybe it looks amazing and it tastes great when it's done, but it was just like, oh yeah, there's specific moments throughout this entire film that, like I mentioned, are kind of like this exercise in sustained tension over things that, like peeling potatoes. It's when she only has one potato left and she knows she has to make dinner, you're like, oh my god, oh no, I gotta go. She's got to go out shopping and get more potatoes. But also her relationship with her son was just kind of like, it was heartbreaking, and yet also, like you mentioned, Kate, there is kind of a comfort, there too, in the routine of doing all these things for your son that I imagine is going on internally. Like it's not all, I probably use the word prison, inaccurately, I guess, to some degree, because it's
Well,
not
I
all
don't
that.
agree with that. Yeah, I just think that I think there's some moments maybe that aren't, but I like I feel like people talk about this movie. Usually they say that it is like this very oppressive environment, and I definitely agree with that. Um, but I also feel like there's some more going on, and it's like it's hard to talk about because I like to watch things a lot before I talk about them, but you can't when it's 3.5 hours long, you know? Um, yeah,
Yeah, and but like the relationship with her son was really interesting, and in a way that I wouldn't mind revisiting again, just because there's certain conversations they have, including when he's like thinking about his parents having sex,
yeah.
and her response to that and everything was really fascinating to me. I was just kind of like, wow, I don't really talk that way with my mom, but okay, that's really interesting to have that kind of relationship with your son. But also it's just there's some vulnerability going on, and it's not all disassociation, I think, because we spend time lingering on her without knowing what she's thinking or feeling, and maybe it's up to the audience. I don't know if it's projection, but it's certainly, there's these feelings of, man, because I read that Delphine and Chantal really didn't get along so well during the making of this, because Delphine wanted to know, I know it's that cliche of an actor, what's my motivation, or what am I thinking or feeling as I'm preparing meatloaf, and Chantal will just go, I don't know.
Great.
Yeah, I know, I remember reading that Chantal Akerman would be like she'd be like, "No, slow down. Like, don't make it like you would normally make it. Like, make it really slow." Yeah, it's very and there I was just, like, fascinated that Chantal Akerman at 25 years old would be working with Delphine Seyrig, who was already, like, kind of a luminous actress at this point, like, mid-career with already with, like, Marienbad and, like, and the Truffaut movie, and I think all of that, like, she'd already done. So it was, like, kind of incredible, I think, that they worked together at all.
Yeah, for sure. But okay, I mean, we definitely have to talk about the ending before we move on,
Yes.
because there's interesting responses out there in terms of not really liking that choice,
Yeah,
or certainly finding it off-putting and out of nowhere, or what's the decision behind doing that? Is it the fact that, she, because we didn't really see her encounters behind closed doors with the other two men to know if she is getting any pleasure out of it, and this time she clearly does to some degree, and then everybody, I'm sure you've seen the movie, and if you haven't, you can skip ahead if you want, but we're spoiling this ending. She stabs this guy with a pair of scissors, and then just sort of sits in the dining room table and reflects on what she's done, possibly. What do you make of this ending? I am still perplexed in a good
I
way.
want to go back to what Sharon said because I think you're right that like there is like some repression going on and like this kind of sterile routine that she's doing to kind of like keep some demons at bay. And I guess that's what I'm maybe thinking about when I don't like maybe that's bad, but I think having lived through quarantine now, I like definitely feel myself doing that sometimes. Like I'm like, all right, well now I'm making a meal. Um, and like this is something I can do for a while to not think about all the other stuff that's going on. Um, so yeah, I think she's definitely doing that, and she has like an order to her day that does kind of unravel as it goes on. And I kind of think my interpretation, even though Jim, you're right, you don't see her encounters with these other men, but my interpretation is that she doesn't really experience pleasure usually. And I think they kind of that Chantal Akerman kind of like signifies this orderliness with like the towel that she puts down, and it's like very sterile. She like puts it down, she takes it up, then she bathes, I think. So like when she is with this man, and like has it seems like she has an orgasm. I think that's like kind of like a final unraveling for her where like
The
her
loss of control,
yeah,
maybe.
she like her body just does something she can't control. I think, and then she kills the guy, which I do think is kind of a weird choice, but I'd love to hear what others have to say about it.
Um, yeah, it's hard. I think she probably, like we're saying about Jean's inner voice or thoughts. She probably, or and by she I mean Chantal Ackerman, didn't really want us to interpret it one way or another. But I mean, I do like. I'm
You're
trying
probably
to
right.
think back to the sex scene, and to me, it seemed like I'm almost remembering her kind of like struggling or feeling stifled or something like that. Like where she just wasn't experiencing any pleasure, and it's the only time that they show the sax, and it seems like she's almost like almost repulsed, or like she doesn't and maybe it does have something to do with the pleasure that he's experiencing, and the fact that she's this is just something like a means to an end for her. But I feel it's an interesting choice, because I feel like in a way it would be really easy to kind of like simplify this movie and say it's a feminist movie where she kind of turns on, she feels repressed by men and she's gonna turn on them. But I feel like it's so much more complex than that, and the fact that it's
Mhm.
it has her name and address are in the title, I feel almost signifies like you shouldn't think about it as a general, feminist movie. It's about this character, and whatever she's feeling. And I think, it's some of the things that we've touched upon a little bit. I think she probably feels some repression. I think she feels some, she probably takes some pride in the things that she's able to do, and being independent, and I think it's just a lot more complex than that. But yeah, she did probably have kind of an something just kind of, once her orders started unraveling, things started to bubble up, and what all of those things are, that may have been hinted at, but we don't really know all of them, I don't think. Yeah.
It's interesting. I was just thinking about comparing the other sex scene in Je tu LL, which is just like very different from this one. Um, in terms of like, I think this is the only movie I've seen of hers where there is any kind of orgasm, as far as I can tell. Um, I don't know. It's just very fascinating.
It's a fascinating choice for a fascinating film, and uh, it's weird because when it happened, I almost felt like it's catharsis. It's a release of all of this repression that she'd been experiencing to some degree, or at least But the thing is like, what does that choice lead to? Well, if you know, if her son comes home and finds a dead body, becomes like, I started thinking about the aftermath,
Yeah,
even though that's not
totally.
really what I'm guessing we're supposed to think about. But I to me, that's kind of where my mind went, because I got so empathic and involved with her character that I thought, oh no, now now you might go to prison, and that's a whole other routine. That's a literal prison.
Oh my god, you're so right. Yeah, I think what I do, like, I don't know how I feel about that stabbing scene. Like, the first time I watched it, I was like, "Oh, wow." This time I was kind of like, I don't know, like, not sure how I felt about it, but I do love the sequence after it, where
Oh
she's
yeah.
just sitting in her dining room, that you've spent a lot of time with her there already, and now it's, like, a different time of day, the lights are out, and, like, if I remember, there's, like, some neon light that's playing from her street, which is, like, a commercial street.
Oh, it's
Uh,
so beautiful. That to me is
yeah.
beautiful.
It's gorgeous, and I think it does invite you to contemplate all of this, because it's a really extended take, and I definitely did. I was, like, thinking about, yeah, like, how this is, like, the final interruption in her routine, because, like, is she gonna cover it up? Like, I actually joked with Maureen, who my wife, who watched this with me. I was like, "Are they setting up Jean Tillman too?" Like, she meticulously cleans up the body, um, like, for another 3 hours. It's just, like, yeah, there's, like, an invitation, I think, to ponder on her thoughts and on what's gonna happen to her. But yeah, I
Yeah.
love, love, love that final sequence.
I think
Yeah, and
that's a
it's
really good
weird too where
point.
my mind went.
Sorry. Sorry, I was
Yeah.
gonna say I think that's a really good
Oh no,
point.
I agree.
Yeah, in that we were talking about how the entire movie, with just her extended takes of her doing or going about her day, we're kind of invited to wonder what she's thinking. And, if sometimes we kind of guess that she's thinking maybe dark thoughts. And in the end, what is she thinking after that happens? This is kind of a continuation of that. And it takes away from it being, like sensationalistic and any kind of, well, I mean, maybe a little bit, but it takes away from that. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, Tim.
Oh no, I don't know why my mind went to thinking about like the this I guess the comparison I can think of most closely to this idea of sex equating to death is Crash,
Mhm.
J.G. Ballard's book and Cronenberg's film, where the funny thing is like I don't connect with the movie because I don't necessarily care that they're not really feeling pleasure from sex anymore. It's like, oh, okay, well, oh well, that sucks. And, but that's all we get to see, like the routine over and over again from these characters. And it's a film that I struggle with, and it's one of those you have every once in a while a movie you kind of wish you responded to or loved because a lot of other people do or something. It's like I've watched it 3 times even though I don't feel a connection to it. It's like that to me is I wondered if there is something to be said about that. Just this idea of destruction, creation, kind of like, oh, I can't handle having an orgasm or something. And so I'm just gonna kill this person that gave it to me. Like I don't know. There's probably some part of me wants to get psychological and Freudian and Jungian about it or something, but I also don't think that's necessarily needed
Yeah.
to analyze it. It's just like it is something that happens. It's almost like, okay, well, this sex just happens as a transaction. Going to the bank is just something that man, that's a lingering moment too, where it's just like, is that other woman just standing there? Like, is she going to talk to the teller or what? There's like moments like that throughout this movie where I'm kind of just mystified, but in a really like jaw dropping way, because I've never seen a filmmaker make these kind of choices before. And it's very similar to when I saw Sofia Coppola somewhere. It was divisive because a lot of people thought, oh, it's so boring and nothing happens, and we just watch this narcissist stew in his mansion or whatever. It's and it's like, but isn't that kind of interesting for a filmmaker to do that, to sort of reflect on the interior life of a character and not have all these flashy heroic moments, or you know like just fireworks going off all the time. It's really interesting to just sit with somebody.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I what's interesting about that to me is, hearing, like, you all's thoughts about it, like, what you were thinking when this was happening, because having these long still takes, it kind of, like, activates your mind in a way, so that, like, the viewer like, you really think about what you're bringing to it too in a way that you don't when a director is sort of leading you through it. So I, like, really loved hearing what you all thought, especially about that last scene, especially Jim. The idea of, like, her routine, like, if she potentially goes to prison, it's just, like, there are so many different things that viewers bring to this, and I feel like she would love that, Chantal Akerman.
Uh,
Yeah, I wish you were here. I wish you could be on the podcast. Oh,
Yeah.
but a couple years later, there's this one I didn't connect with as strongly, but it's Les Rendezvous d'Anna.
Oh, I
Yeah,
really liked this one.
you really liked it.
I did, yeah.
You go for it then. You start off the introduction to it, or talk about it a bit.
Sure. Well, I mean, I feel like I'm kind of gonna be repeating myself because, like I said, I felt like a lot of her themes kind of run across her movies. And like the way in this one, I feel like I feel like public transit is a thing that comes up in a lot of her movies.
Mm,
Or just maybe this is just like a Europe thing that we don't have in America as much or as thoroughly, but she spends a lot of time on trains, and also in hotel rooms. So there's just like a lot of like sort of like liminal transitional spaces that she's in. The character Anna, which is based on Chantal Akerman too. So like even her fictional movies all have like this autobiographical backbone to them. So Rendezvous, whatever, Rendezvous de Anna, Travels of Anna is sort of based on Chantal Akerman's life, touring her movies.
mm,
Um, so I just, yeah, I really liked just seeing this actress, Aurora Clement, in all these different spaces and interacting with these different people. Um, and I'm like, some of them are people she's never met. Some of them, like, she meets her mother and has like this really beautiful interaction with her mother.
oh yeah, that's a great moment.
Yeah, and like her various lovers she meets and has like simultaneously like moments of connection, but also these moments of alienation. And it's like mostly in hotel rooms, which just feel very strange. I think I'm like kind of fascinated by hotel rooms in general.
Oh, I am too. Did you watch Hotel Monterey?
I didn't get to that one, but I really wanted to.
We'll save it for part two.
Okay. Yeah, and just how they're sort of like public transit and trains, a space that's designed like not for one person but for many people to just be in, and like the feeling of being in a room that's not really designed for you, but it's just designed to get you from here to there. Um, it was just an interesting thing to think about, just how if a space is made for everybody, that it's really made for nobody, and that it feels kind of weird to occupy those spaces. And when she's on trains with other people just kind of like looking out the window, you get
Hmm.
that feeling too. It's Yeah, I don't know what like my major takeaways from this film are, but I really loved watching it and I thought it was just like beautifully shot too.
Oh yeah, yeah, for sure. I think in terms of capturing hotel loneliness, it's very strong. And it reminded me a little bit of Charlie Kaufman's Anomalisa without the surrealism. You
Mhm.
Charlie Kaufman, obviously very different filmmaker, very very weird and surreal and strange. But it's like the things I remember the most about Anomalisa, aside from Jennifer Jason Leigh's incredible performance, is just this idea of being alone in a hotel, and that's almost unbearable for some people.
Mhm.
So you literally like, I gotta try and find somebody in this town to connect with, or even if I have to go get drunk at a bar and meet somebody, I gotta bring them back. The idea of being alone in this foreign environment is too much for me to handle.
Yeah,
I just didn't connect with the characters that she connected with. I didn't find them as interesting, I guess. I mean, she doesn't either at certain points,
right.
but But no, definitely the moment with her mother, I thought was really really poignant. Sharon, what did you think of this one?
Well, this is one that I'm glad you asked about, because I actually watched this one twice because I liked it the first time. But I really did enjoy it so much more the second time, and I feel like I got more
Oh,
out
good.
of it. And yeah, I had read also that the character was based on Chantal Akerman, and I just felt, to me, my big takeaway is I felt like it was both a it showed the upside and the downside of this lifestyle. The upside is the freedom, the traveling wherever you want, it, meeting different people, doing different things. But then the downside is it's a very nomadic, lonely at times existence. You fall asleep alone, even though you have excitement during the day, you have public adoration, you have no one to sleep next to at night. And then um to me, what I picked up on watching it again is that she let everyone, friends and family members who she meets with talk about these, why aren't you don't have anyone to take care of you, you don't have a partner. But then it's funny when they describe their own domestic partnerships, it's always in in a very negative way. Like, my husband is always irritated with me, and he's
Mhm.
depressed because we don't have any money, or they almost never, I don't think anyone in the film describes a happy domestic partnership, beginning from that first man she meets whose wife ran away on him, and another thing that was I found funny was when there's a family friend who's been trying to get her to marry her son, and she said she broke her engagement
Mm.
twice, and she says something like, "Oh well, the past is the past." But why would you do it twice? Like she kept bringing, she's like, "Oh, it's all forgotten." But I just don't understand why someone would do that. So I thought that was kind of funny. But yeah, to me, I thought it was really interesting in that it showed, one choice isn't necessarily uh, going to lead to more happiness than the other. And, they both have their upsides and downsides, so, and then the other thing, that that ending kind of really struck me, or the final scenes toward the ending, where she's singing that song, and it's about two lovers who are in a hotel or something, and they have a moment of happiness, and that's enough. Like, it's so, I think she said, so bright it hurts, but that's all that they have. And then I think they die together. And so I feel like the whole movie, to me, was kind of like making a statement about how a lot of times things like that are temporary, love, or the kind of like bright love, that you where you feel so smitten, is temporary. And then after that, you have the kind of, we work at it, we try to keep each other happy. And I felt like that was one thing. And then also when she was getting all the in the very end, when she was listening to our answering machine messages of all the people she missed, or all the people she wanted to meet up with, I was thinking, like, the reason it's called Meetings with Anna, and this seems like kind of a dumb revelation, but if to me, I was just like, is because they, that's all they get. They get a meeting with her. That's all the time that she has. She just has meetings, and she doesn't have any strings attached to any particular person, and it's, to me, it's both kind of a celebration of that lifestyle, and also, kind of shows the loneliness that comes, like the price you have to pay for it. So yeah, I really felt like that was a very rich movie, and I got a lot more out of watching it again.
Yeah, the way you're describing it makes me think of Lost in Translation.
Yeah, yeah.
Because the way they have this connection together, while staying in the same hotel is kind of beautiful. And again, you don't know what they say to one another at the end, but I always think of it as like, oh well, we at least we had this time together. I don't think they're gonna go back and end their relationships and wind up together. I don't think it's meant to be that in the end for them. And similar to some of the people that uh, Anna meets here, I think that probably holds true. I'll watch it again. I'll definitely certainly I respond to more of what you're saying, what both of you are saying, and it makes me want to watch it again because when I was on tour as a musician, I did it for like 6 weeks, but not everybody, not every show I played, there was not always a there wasn't always a person there to say, hey, you can crash on my couch if you need to. So there would be times where I would either sleep in my car in a parking lot, or I would go to a hotel or a motel, uh, preferably an affordable one, even if it was not the best place to stay. And there, yeah, definitely, like, because I came down from the high of playing a show to suddenly being in a room completely alone. And there's just like this insane, almost like bipolar nature to being a touring musician. And like I can understand this character, and certainly that's got to hold true for authors who go on book tours and directors who are going on tour to different festivals with their films. So yeah, no, it makes sense, and I would definitely recommend it to people. We have to get to we have to get to this incredibly joyful film that it was one of the earlier ones I watched, and I'm kind of like, what? I this is not what I've heard before. This is not all the things I've read about Chantal Akerman. I don't know if they mentioned golden 80s.
Yeah, I'd never really heard of it, but it was definitely fascinating. Especially,
I yeah,
yeah,
I it's clear that she might have, been a fan of like the Umbrellas of Cherbourg, or I think I said that right. Just like those joyful French musicals where it's pretty much wall to wall musicals, or musical numbers. And when it's like that, I was so happy. I mean, that when all those women are working in the the barber shop and everything, it's like, or the salon, I and they're singing and working on people's hair. I was just kind of like, oh, this is so nice to experience. It really is. It's full of just unabashed joy, and in ways that kind of shattered my expectations and felt refreshing. And certainly there's melancholy, and certainly there's things and themes that we've come to know that are presented here, and certainly there's some heavier, weightier things on her mind, but it's mostly interspersed with a lot of incredibly catchy numbers that I definitely liked the fact that she got out of her comfort zone to make something like this at that particular time. Sharon, I know you're a fan. And you weren't at first. Like, I remember messaging you, like, I think I tried watching it and it just didn't click with me, but now you're loving it, right?
Yeah, actually, I uh started watching it one night and I was kind of sleepy and I don't think I watched it through the end, but I was like, oh, that's really cool. She's doing something different. And I initially thought it was too silly. And, I think because I've been watching all her other movies, I was like, oh, this one's just silly or fluffy or, whatever. But I'm glad that you convinced me to give it another chance, or I myself wanted to give it another chance anyway. But yeah, because the second time I watched it, I did connect to it more. I watched all the way through, and I think I told you this. The part that really moved me was, toward the end where she had that Delphine Seyrig has that monologue about love. And here she's a Holocaust survivor, and she's comforting,
Mhm.
this jilted bride,
Mm.
saying, I love is never lost, love never means nothing, you'll find someone else to love. And she's comforting her. And there's just something so touching about that. And just the way she's still she's still convinced that there's love, and that love is still out there, and the love you put out there is still out there somewhere. And I feel like it's really, to me, that's kind of like the substance of the movie is, these kind of different types of love. And there's this also you know, she herself has Delphine Seyrig's character has an old lover come back, and she says something to him like, "Oh, that kind of love is for the young," or something. That whole kind of like burning, swooning kind of, I'll love you
Yeah.
forever. And I thought that was really interesting because then she herself goes around to encourage, that kind of love for someone else. But then I was thinking that she's, sparing someone, I don't know, she's sparing someone else from being hurt. So I just, yeah, all those kind of dynamics with the relationships and the different, discussions of the different types of, that's what really hooked me, the different types of love and relationships. And I felt like that was what gave it a little more depth than being like a shopping mall musical, which is in itself really interesting. But yeah, that was kind of like the hook for me. Yeah, was I felt like it had interesting things to say about the relationships, and how his the main one of the main characters, his father, is saying, forget about this woman who you're so obsessed with, and head over heels, because she's not the one you're going to marry. Go find the woman you're going to marry.
Hmm.
Just all those different kind of takes on it, I think, were what was interesting to me. Yeah. So I like it now. I'm
Yeah,
a
and it
fan.
has this abrupt ending though. That's it definitely has this abrupt ending that kind of was like, oh, okay, they're out of the mall, and then suddenly, yeah, it comes to a really kind of swift resolution. That I don't know. I guess that's probably the only thing I was like, I don't know. Maybe this could be ended a little differently, but everything else, yeah, it worked for me pretty much. Like you do have to sort of again reacclimate yourself and prepare for this kind of giddy nature.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it seems appropriate for the mid 80s too, or it might be the early 80s, but yeah. Kate, what do you think?
I was definitely surprised by it, but I was also surprised by how it kind of like fits with her sensibility in this really weird way, where like um I think movie musicals do best when they're like in these long takes with people with the frame kind of still, or like Fosse style moving with people like without all these
Mm-hmm.
choppy cuts. So in that way, I was like kind of surprised how well like her style did movie musical. It was like it really worked for me in that way. Um, but also that she sort of translates, like I know we've talked about like her letter writing thing. I feel like almost every movie involves someone like reading a letter or writing a letter, and like the very first musical number in this one is someone like singing a letter that she got from her lover in Canada. And I thought that was like a really interesting translation of that theme,
Hmm.
and like once again worked really well for me. But also like it's just I don't know how big into musicals you two are. I am very into them. I love musicals.
I wish I was more into them, but I like a lot of the major ones that I've seen. Obviously, Singing in the Rain, like the classics, I do enjoy.
Well, I think there's like kind of like a miss. I think a lot of people think that they're, to me, a lot of musicals have this like buoyant exterior that like kind of has like a darker, like the upbeat tunes sort of make up for this like sort of darker undercurrents that are going on. And to me, like
Mm,
there are, like especially since like Jean Dielman, not John Dielman, but her character is named Jean, which is interesting. Delphine
yeah.
Zeyrek's character is a Holocaust survivor, and like they keep on mentioning like the reason she didn't end up with this guy who comes back into her life is because she is like so depressed from the camps that she doesn't think she can really ever heal from that. But then she does, and like that's kind of, I think, like a theme in Chantal Akerman's work, that you kind of persevere through a lot of that stuff. You can't, or just like moving through these moments of trauma. So I do think like there are moments of trauma that are sort of uplifted by all these like happy love sort of things. But then there's also this like, they're constantly sort of worried about money also. So
Oh
it's not
yeah.
just like this like bubblegum mall. They're also like negotiating like leases and like worried about like customers coming in and like how nobody has money to shop.
Oh,
So it's like kind of this ups and downs of these people's lives that I really enjoyed. And also, I just think the setting of the mall is really visually interesting, and all these parts where like two characters are trying to talk and get kind of interrupted by a flow of people
yeah.
were just very, very fun to watch too, and just sort of reminded me of some of her other transit scenes where just like a parade of people will suddenly come through. Um,
Yeah, very interesting opening sequence for sure.
but also that the ending I think is fascinating because it ends with like this little monologue of Jean's husband who's like comparing love to buying
Oh,
dresses.
Oh yeah, 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 yeah.
Wait, I like had a note about it because I thought it was really interesting.
Yeah.
Um, where is it? Yeah, it's um, you like, oh, just kind of like how he says, and you better find the right one, like find the right person, because if you don't, we go out of business. It's just like a fascinating comparison. Just that like love and like relationships sort of propel people forward, and it can be sort of transactional. Like I don't think it's being completely cynical in that way, but it has like this cynical moment with this
Yeah.
guy. But yeah, I really liked it. And it does have a levity that her other movies definitely don't have, at least not. I know there are millions I didn't get to, but this was definitely the lightest
yeah.
touch of all the other ones.
There was one that you saw, Sharon, that I didn't get to see that you said was had a lot of levity. Was it a documentary?
Oh, yeah. Well,
Because I know it tackles her Jewish
Oh,
family to
yeah, I
some
watched that
degree.
one too.
yeah, no, actually, well, I was gonna say, I think Kate, like you kind of nailed it because I think I had to get that to that dark, undercurrent before I really got a hook in that movie. At first, I didn't really see it,
Mhm.
but then, when I think especially when he came back, her old, it wasn't her lover, it was like her protector or from the Holocaust. And just I started to notice some of that other stuff. I was like, oh, this stuff is kind of like just buried under a lot of colorful singing stuff. But I do agree. I think it has a lot of it's both her most like one of her accessible and lightest, but also still has a lot of like depth to it. But the other one I really liked was and I feel like this doesn't get as much attention as some of her other ones. It's Food, Family, and Philosophy, or I think it's Histories I'm not sure. Demarikis.
Mhm.
I think close to that, but and it's actually not. It's a fictional film, and that's really interesting because it begins with some kind of like monologues from immigrants. Yeah, and it's all Jewish immigrants, I think. And they're telling in the beginning they're telling some pretty dark stories, so you won't think
Hmm.
it's funny like what she's talking about. But then it's funny when it gets like maybe half an hour in. There's a lot of like dark absurdist humor to it that just kind of like comes out of nowhere. It's really interesting. Like I'm trying to think of an example. There's a guy who goes through a revolving door, and someone else, he has a beard, and someone else comes out, and he's like clean shaven. And this guy in the street goes, "How did you shave so quick?" And there's all these other weird little moments like that. And then toward the end, there's like there's this big restaurant scene. It's very like absurdist. And there's this thunderstorm coming,
Mhm.
and it's just like some of these other characters that have been in and out of the movie are, sitting there um talking, and it almost feels like a Samuel Beckett play or something. It's just like so absurd. It's like one of them is asking directions to the road somewhere, and like three different people try to describe it to him and they can't, and they're like, oh, there's no way to really get there. And like, it's very interesting, but it does have a lot of humor. It's kind of like weird and dark humor. I like that one quite a bit. Yeah.
Yeah, I liked that one too, and I loved that diner scene where it's yeah, the Samuel Beckett comparison makes a lot of sense. It's just um like all these tables and this like outdoor area, and I think all of it was filmed sort of like in the same area, but a lot of it is just like people on sidewalks and like in alleys in various places. And I just watched news from home, so that terrain felt like pretty
Oh,
familiar.
yeah.
Um, yeah,
Maybe I'll watch this one tonight instead. I can't decide now because I think I'm gonna like it. I just didn't get to it, but I'm excited to. Yeah, we'll sort of end with news from home, but there's one in particular that might be my favorite. As much as I love Jean Dielman, there's this film she did for a television series, and the full title is Portrait of a Young Girl at the End of the 1960s in Brussels,
Oh yeah, I
Mhm.
like
and
that one a lot. I almost forgot about that.
it, it's an hour long, and I believe it came out in the early 90s. Oh, it captures exactly what it's like to be lost at that particular age. And like, the lead character drops out of school, steals money, hooks up with a boy that she picks up at the movies, and yet they sort of go on this like before sunrise like journey, kind of, like they're having these profound conversations together, and sometimes they're profound, sometimes they're just talking, about things that they think and feel, or just what they're experiencing in the moment. But and then the sort of final act really really blew me away, because I kind of know that feeling of, unrequited love with a friend or something, and it's like that dance between two friends
Oh.
was kind of like the emotional high point of all the films I watched. And there's just a lot of internal conflict going on within this character that, felt very palpable. It felt very familiar, and it was like I want to see more from this actress. It's really, again, I think, you could say yes, it's made for TV, so it's not the kind of like tour de force in terms of cinematography that her other films are. But at the same time, I think this one is very personal for her as well. And I don't know if it's entirely autobiographical note for note, but it certainly felt that way to me, and I thought it was really beautiful.
Yeah, I like that one a lot. I almost forgot about that, but actually I did watch that earlier, and the main reason is because I watched some short documentary on her to try to get a feel for what to watch, and that one came up with the clip of the two women dancing and the James Brown song, or "It's a man's world," and then she cuts in with a man, and I was like, "Oh my god, I've got to see this movie!" So I tried to track it
Oh,
down, and I eventually found it, I think, on YouTube. But yeah, it's hard to find, but it's a really good one. It's just a really, yeah, it's a good emotional like coming of age story. Yeah.
Yeah, I
100%.
unfortunately didn't watch that one, but I I would like
You,
to.
Kate, will love it.
Yeah, that description sounds great. I mean, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, to sort of end on, again, another very personal film. It's one of the few documentaries. Well, maybe is it the only documentary of hers I watched? I think it might be. News from Home, which I was, again, pretty floored by it, because it's very simple in its execution. and yet it captures a place, it captures a time, the way we've described like these internal spaces here, it's a lot of external spaces, a lot of being on the streets of New York. And she was living in New York and began correspondence with her mother, and sort of just takes whatever she wrote in letter form as voiceover while we see these still shots, often of New York streets and subways and people on the street. And yeah, it's like it gives you room to meditate and reflect. There's a lot of longing in some of these shots. I mean, personally, I've always part of me wanted to be a photographer at some point. So when I see just beautiful still images, I'm moved by that alone sometimes. And you get that throughout this entire film where you're just kind of like, that's an amazing shot. You can hold on that forever. I'll enjoy that. And but again, you do have to prepare yourself for one mood, one tone, one sensation to sort of carry along. But then again, it sort of does get more melancholy and beautiful as it goes on. I yeah, I meant to see her last film because I know it connects to this pretty directly. But man, I really strongly responded to News from Home in its simplicity, for sure. What do you guys think?
Go ahead.
Um, yeah, I had a lot of strong feelings about this one too. I know Chantal Akerman had a really close relationship with her mother, and that really comes through here, and it
Mhm.
feels very personal. And her mother's letters are just I wonder I'd love to read about more about the relationship and how her mother feels about being featured in a lot of this stuff. I only got to watch part of No Home Movie, which is her last film that also involves her mom a lot. Um, but yeah, the relationship is really beautiful. And I just think I'm fascinated by the letter writing portion of all of her work and just how people connect through letters.
Yeah,
And just like, even though, like, how do you connect with somebody, or like, how do you write a letter? Like, when you write a letter, it's always like, I mean, and it's like this in this movie too. She's like, well, these people are getting married, or like, dad's sick. And it's just kind of like, yeah, news from home. Like, basically, when you write a letter, you like kind of just report on what's happening around you, like your thoughts. But like often just like details, like we went to dinner with this family or whatever. Um, and the way that it's juxtaposed over like these beautiful shots of New York City where Chantal Akerman had just moved. So they'd been apart, or like she was apart from her mom for like I think the first time really substantially. So there's like a physical distance between them, and a longing in her mom's letters. Her mom will be like, "You didn't respond to this letter," or like, "I just want to know you're okay."
yeah,
Um, so there's this very, I don't know, it just makes me think of like the sort of difficulties in maintaining relationships in general, and sort of like rectifying your interior and exterior worlds. So like Chantal Ackerman is like in New York City, like physically and just sort of like mentally, maybe back in Brussels with her mom, but also like in all these other places. It just like is a very human film to me about like connection and how difficult that can be. Um, Even though like she and her mother were so close, it's just like the methods we have of reaching other people are sort of finite, just as other people. It's like you
hmm
talk on the phone, you write letters, but like ultimately those are sort of like the only tools we have. And like filmmaking for Chantal Ackerman. But those are the things that it made me think of. And I just loved it. And I just like love their relationship, and you see it in No Home Movie too. But it's just like very sweet.
yeah. It
Um,
seems like it for sure.
yeah,
Yeah, I mean, yeah. There's a slow pace to the majority of her work, but I think it allows you to linger on the humanity of the everyday and things that maybe you take for granted. Like there are certain moments where I'm like, even when I drive or take the train in Chicago, I kind of like sometimes get emotional at how beautiful some parts of the city are, how old some of the buildings are, and it's or even just seeing the lake. It's simple, like little things like that that I don't know. I find parts of the environment to be very moving, and maybe that's even why, like nature trail hikes can be really special when you feel open to that world and you see things that you don't always see because you're living in a busy city where you don't get to see those things all the time. And seeing New York portrayed like this, for sure was kind of eye opening. And but I agree too to some extent that it's more of an art piece, and maybe it's not a traditionally A to B to C narrative film or documentary, but there's certainly an emotional weight with those letters that I think gives it an extra layer beyond just like, oh, those are cool shots, you know? So I'm kind of grateful for it, as I am grateful for the both of you for talking with me about this incredible director who clearly, like, thinking about some of my favorite filmmakers, Kelly Reichardt, Gus Van Sant, Todd Haynes, Sofia Coppola, they're all fans. They all saw her work and felt changed by it. And to some degree, I understand that feeling because, like, as I was ending or as I knew we were about to record, I kind of went, man, why can't I just watch everything? Why can't I just quit my job and watch Chantal Akerman films and talk about them for 3 hours? So thank you.
Yeah, yeah, I like don't know what she's trying to say always, but I always like felt moved in some way by all of these. I really love her. And I'm pretty excited that she has such a big output that I have like so much left to see. There's like yeah, there's a lot I didn't get to and a few that we didn't or I watched that we didn't discuss here. So part 2.
Oh yeah, there's gonna have to be a part two. That there's so much left to talk about. And if there's something you think is essential really quickly, you can sort of sum it up quickly if you want. I'm okay with that.
um
I mean, it might be hard to do that, because like her work is so complex, even when it's simple.
yeah, I mean, I'll just throw in that like The Captive surprised me. I mean, that's I guess that's the one movie I watched that didn't really have an autobiographical
Hmm.
thing because it's based on Proust, I think.
Yeah.
But I'll throw that one out there as one that was pretty cool to watch and like maybe a little different. It actually reminded me a lot of like more of a Chabrol film.
Ooh.
That there
Okay.
was this sort of like quiet thriller aspect to it. I don't know if I call it essential viewing, but I definitely liked it a lot.
Okay. Cool. Yeah. I mean, I usually do like, what were your three favorites that you saw, and I sort of covered that within the episode too. But you know, Jean Dielman is probably her masterwork, so I'm going to put that at the top. And then number two would be Portrait of a Young Girl at the End of the 1960s in Brussels, and number three would be News from Home.
I'm actually kind of feeling the same about Jean Dielman. I love that movie, and this was my second time watching it. And like there were like multiple years between those two viewings because the first time was so intense. It'll probably be like several years before I watch it again, if not more. Um, but I think it would still make my top 3. I don't know if I can rank them in order, but yeah, we'll put that in the top 3 just because it's so thought-provoking and because in in these times, it just, like, felt like a different movie than the first time I watched it. Um, so I just feel like I guess I'm wondering, like, in 6 years or whatever, when I manage to watch it again, how is it gonna feel when I watch it that time? I'm very curious about that. Or maybe, like, if I have kids, like, what it'll feel like when I have a kid maybe, or, like I just feel like that's one that probably resonates very differently at different times in your life. So, for that virtue, I'll put it in my top 3. And also News from Home, just Yeah, there's something about just like the letters against these static shots that really like spoke to me somehow. Um, and it's another one of those films where I was kind of just like, I just felt the time passing, but it was in kind of a pleasant way. Um, I mean, I know, Jim, you go into work. I've been working from home this whole time, so I definitely like feel like I have a lot of time to fill. And so Chantal Akerman just like worked really well with this time in my life, where in her films you feel the time passing, and I was like, well, I feel the time passing anyway. Like, bring it on. Um, yeah. Um, and then I think Travels of Anna was my other probably top one. Um, and that's just because that I mean, I almost feel like I need to watch that again to really understand what I was watching. But it's just so beautiful, and I think I really like Aurora Clement. I just like was fascinated by her acting, and I'm like a person who loves acting, and I love talking about it. And she's just like very, very expressive, despite like most of the acting she does is really just like with her body and face, and not she's not like overly expressive. She's just sort of like receptive in a way that I thought was really amazing. And she's not really an actress I'm not familiar with, so it made me want to explore more of her work, which is always a fun feeling.
Well, folks, that's the end of this show. And if you're wondering why it's ending like this, well, we had some technical difficulties that caused the track to get deleted. But let's end with Sharon's top 3 Akerman films, which would be Meetings with Anna, Golden 80s, as well as Food, Family, and Philosophy. Please follow both of my guests on Letterboxd. Links are in the show notes. Stay tuned until late May for the next official episode on Louis Malle, as well as some birthday bonus surprises coming your way. Thank you again to my amazing guests for talking Chantal Akerman. Sorry that this episode ended so strangely, but you can thank the wonders of technology for being so faulty. Visit directorsclubpodcast.com, nowplaynetwork.net. Thanks everybody for listening, and be safe. I'm Jim Laskowski. Bye-bye.
Elle nous fait un de ses concerts à propos de son Robert. Elle erre dans cet univers alors qu'il faut faire la guerre et prendre un paratonnerre. Dans la nuit bleue, j'arrange tout contre mon dos, la gorge en feu. Ému, perdu, comme un enfant, tu fermes les yeux. Alors tu cries, je t'aime, mais au grand jour, tu ne me vois plus. Tu ne vois qu'elle, tu ne penses qu'à elle. Oh Lili, Lili, qui tout entier me l'a pris. Je suis folle d'amour pour lui.